This man is so pitiful. He is chased, and on the run wherever he goes. Seeing Robert is like seeing a family member. Robert, how come you are here? Robert jumped onto the roof where Cooper was, facing him, and said that he had been on the run since Fortress 113 collapsed, all the way to here. I heard that Robert also fled here. Cooper also sympathizes. When he saw Robert, he felt an instant sense of familiarity. He then confided his inner turmoil to him, coincidentally hiding in the weapons transport truck driven by Leon. The weapons are not used to deal with you, are they? I didn't expect that Leon would come here to pursue you. Hearing Cooper say so, Robert speculated in his heart. Cooper doesn't know about Leon's situation of not being able to return to the Q family now. What are these smuggled weapons being brought in for? Robert asked, looking at Cooper with a serious expression. Cooper expressed his concern. It must be hard for you to evade pursuit from the Q family, he said, as he pulled out half a steamed bun from his pocket. I don't know why, but Robert's nose suddenly felt a bit sour at that moment. He said, I'm not hungry. Cooper, you're a good guy. Robert was so touched by this scene that he felt like going to surrender himself to the Q family. He took out a letter and a stack of money from his pocket and said, You hold onto these things. Take this letter and go to 178 Fortress to find someone named Zach. He will give you a promising future. Thinking of Mr. Zhang, Robert suddenly felt that people like Cooper would definitely live better on the northern side of the border. However, at this moment, there were several shadows slowly approaching in the distance on the rooftops. Robert looked around and suddenly realized that they were surrounded. When Robert saw the Seed of Fire Company logo on their chests, he was taken aback. At this point, Cooper's understanding of the outside world is clearly not as much as Robert's. Be careful. They are not good guys. They specialize in capturing supernatural entities. After saying that, Cooper pulled out a gun from his waist. Although the sound of gunfire may attract more trouble, they don't have time to worry about that now. Robert observed the surrounding terrain. It might be a tough day today. The problem is that he is a little reluctant to reveal his ability to summon shadow in front of Cooper. At this time, the young man opposite said, Dawn has never failed in taking action. Why don't you surrender and save us the trouble? Cooper hesitated for a moment and said, Did Dawn take action? It's almost dawn now. Your timing is off. Then Dawn's youth was speechless. Suddenly he realized that Cooper might not have even heard of the organization Dawn. However, at this moment, Cooper and Robert suddenly raised their hands, grabbed their guns, and started shooting. The two of them acted as if it was rehearsed, without any hesitation. But their respective targets surprisingly dodged the bullets at the same time. Robert's heart sank slowly. No wonder the other party would say such nonsense. It turns out their strength is unexpectedly strong. He was still thinking about how to escape. If he really wants to run, he might be okay. But Cooper would be in trouble. And being watched himself, will there be no more trouble in the future? Suddenly, a bright figure appeared in Robert's pupils. Julia in the distance was holding a huge sniper rifle and looking in this direction. The opportunity has arrived. Pay attention. This man wants to recruit Robert and Cooper. He grandly claims that he is contributing to all of humanity. In reality, he wants to conduct gene editing on them. However, the price to pay is the loss of freedom. How important is freedom to Robert? In this moment, the originally swaying cloth strips no longer moved. The air between heaven and earth seemed to have solidified. Robert silently repeated in his mind, It's now. In an instant, it felt as if a distant killing intent was about to arrive. The young man who was speaking suddenly had his chest burst open, a bullet shot from hundreds of meters away, until Robert could see the shape of the blood in the air. The booming sound of gunfire came closer and closer. Thank you. Robert laughed. His laughter was radiant. He said to Cooper, You go deal with the left side. Before the words had even fallen, Robert had already jumped towards the roof on the right side. The encirclement formed by the four people had already shown a gap. This was the way out that Julia opened for him. There were no more sniper bullets left. Robert knew that even with a perfect level of gun skill, it was impossible to hit a fast-moving supernatural entity. So next, Robert can only rely on himself. When he jumped into the alley, he summoned the Phantom at the first time. Since we can't just abandon the questions and leave, then let's kill all the people who create the questions. This is the logic of the wilderness. Robert and Shadow are back to back, blocking the enemies in front and behind. One of them can teleport. Sharp claws grew inside the other glove. Is this still a human? Is this genetic editing? One side has a blade, and the other has sharp claws. Robert summoned Black Blade while charging towards the opponent. He swung with all his might. The psychic was instantly killed. He could not believe that one person could possess two abilities enough to cause death. However, what they didn't know was that Robert possessed three abilities. Unfortunately, they never got the chance to witness them. Robert easily took care of the two. Just as he was relaxing, someone suddenly dashed out from the dark behind him. He didn't expect that Dawn had someone else hiding in the dark relying on super ability. The supernatural entity suddenly jumped up with a long knife in hand and slashed towards Robert. Robert, feeling helpless, had to use the Gate of Shadow. In an instant, the man looked at the knife tip protruding from his chest and the blood flowing out. Actually able to stab a knife from behind to the face. Robert stood quietly. There was only one thought in his heart. People from Dawn don't seem that great either. It's like making a big move and turns out it's just a little mouse. He recalled Shadow and climbed back up to the roof, only to see Cooper sitting on the roof panting heavily. I was thinking of treating him to a meal before setting off to Fortress 178, but Cooper wanted to leave early. Staying behind would also be a burden on Robert. Cooper said gratefully, "Thank you." At this moment, Robert really wanted to say to Cooper, "How about you stay? Just say thank you every day." Robert thought for a moment and nodded. Perhaps they would meet again at 178 Fortress. Take care. This is when the others who wanted to catch them arrived, but it was too late. The logo of Seed of Fire Company on the clothes of the deceased made the personnel from the Order Enforcement Division understand. This was no longer something they could intervene in. Recently, it has indeed been quite turbulent. Number 4 Mental Hospital was bathed in blood, and the explosion created by Seed of Fire Company during the capture of supernatural entities. After completing the mission, Robert's current strength value reached 8.5, and his agility also increased to 5.1. The next battle should be easier. On the rooftop of a tall building in the distance, Julia just put away her firearm weapons. Lucy beside her curiously asked, "Although these few people are not the main force of Dawn. But that kid is killing people too easily, right? Maybe we underestimated him before." Julia looked at the distant battlefield, wondering what she was thinking. Robert's performance did surprise her. Although she did not see the battle in the alley, she did not expect Robert to be able to fight 3 opponents on his own. Originally, Julia just wanted to open an escape route for Robert, but he ended up wiping out the entire group of Dawn. This surprised both Julia and Lucy a little. "This kid is very murderous," Lucy said. "You can tell from his eyes. Whenever there is a threat, he subconsciously wants to eliminate it to prevent future troubles." Julia lamented a bit, saying this is probably due to his upbringing. He just wants to survive. Lucy immediately stepped forward and grabbed Julia's arm, gossiping, "Why are you in such a hurry to explain for him? The kid himself is already pretty capable now. Together with the powerful but unpredictable Cody, they form a strong little team. Shall we shift our focus to them?" "They just want to live well in the fortress," Julia said calmly. Upon hearing this, Lucy burst into laughter. In fact, she didn't really want to do anything, just wanted to test the waters. That night the entire fortress was organized. Robert felt the tense atmosphere outside. There seemed to be a sense of an impending storm within the entire fortress. The next day on campus. When Robert arrived in the classroom, Julia was already seated in her place. She glanced at Robert. Did anything else strange happen last night besides the battle with Dawn? Robert was stunned when he heard this. She continued, Just last night, Q family increased the bounty on Lucy, and I don't know why. I don't know why. Robert understood in his heart. Without showing any sign, he casually said, I have no idea what's going on either. Julia remained silent for half a day. She wasn't expecting to get answers from Robert. Thank you. Rin Shizu earnestly thanked. Julia nodded as if she didn't care. She was a little puzzled about Robert saving Cooper. What other purposes could I have? After all, we met by chance. We have traveled together in Mountain J for so long. We are considered teammates. If something happened to you, I would also take the risk to save you. Julia glanced up at him. This is considered explaining the past. Robert breathed a sigh of relief. The more trouble he stirs up outside now, the more trouble he gets into. The two then discussed Daisy's handling method. Robert decided to hand her over to the hooligans for reformation. But it was also on the day when the task was completed 4 days later. You may not be able to imagine how powerful the university is inside the absurd Apocalypse Fortress. Although there are only 4 subjects in the exams, including mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. Each subject has a total score of 150. You need to score at least 104 to get into university. Robert took a deep breath. He did a practice test the day before yesterday. He only scored a total of 140 out of 600 in the 4 subjects. As soon as the teacher arrived, the classroom instantly quieted down. These days, as long as one is a good student, they all have the ambition to go to college. Because nowadays the term, college student, implies knowledge, status, and money. The college life is also something that many people long for. Classes are relatively flexible, but exams are very strict. This also results in fewer students being admitted. Among the more than 100 fortresses, there are roughly over 20 universities. University leaders are streamlining students and institutions, focusing all efforts on breakthroughs in certain fields. Robert looked at Julia, wondering how to get 140 points in each subject. Julia glanced at him. You just need to leave out 2 multiple-choice questions. Robert was immediately puzzled. He is a bad student who never pays attention in class. What qualifications do you have to pretend to be a good student? We are no different. How good is Julia at math? Palace says mid-level. Upon hearing Palace say this, he felt happy. Although this mid-level is definitely better than him, it's still not considered a good student. Next, Palace said that her high school math and high school physics are both at a perfect level of existence. At that moment, he suddenly realized that he was the only underachiever in this classroom. When is a person the loneliest? Julia glanced at him and suddenly asked, Do you want to go to college? Robert was extremely upset at the moment. He said, I don't deserve it. Robert is facing his first final exam in his life. Looking around, there was not a single person in the entire classroom that he knew. There were exams back when he was at the small town schoolhouse as well. However, those were conducted by Zach directly through questioning, whereas here, they use papers. Robert thinks that Zach's method of examining students one by one through questioning is purely to save money on paper for exams. After all, paper is not cheap nowadays. At this moment, a girl sitting behind Robert patted him on the shoulder. How's your studying going? Can you let me copy the test paper? Suddenly, Palace in Robert's mind said the task, help classmates finish the exam paper. Robert was shocked at that time. He couldn't even tell if this Palace had upright values or twisted values. How could he even help with cheating? However, for Robert, as long as he has a task to do, then everything is not a problem. Handing over a test paper filled with answers is completing a task and receiving thanks in return. The girl praised Robert for his cleverness as she looked at the test paper filled with answers to all the questions. Robert turned his head and said with a smile, I actually don't know. The other person was speechless instantly. In fact, making up a whole test paper was quite tiring. This is the miraculous medicine that Robert acquired from the palace, because of its magical effects. Now being targeted by someone with ulterior motives. Robert just returned to Herbal Hall Clinic. Luna told him that Walter had been taken away. The three who had just returned were shocked to hear this. Robert is most worried about his own secret being exposed. It turns out that the Order Enforcement Division came over to say that selling medicines without a license and having a clinic without a doctor with a qualified medical certificate. Robert breathed a sigh of relief. Although Walter being arrested was a big deal, as long as it does not involve any supernatural entity, it's fine. Robert thought for a moment and said, No rush. Leon should come to the store tonight. I need to ask him what's going on. He also wants to quickly rescue Walter. But handling this matter cannot be reckless. He needs to ask Leon about the situation first to know what is the appropriate action. The next moment, he heard the sound of vehicles approaching on the street. Robert turned his head to look. Isn't the person shivering in the passenger seat Leon? He smiled and said, Why is everyone standing at the door? Robert bluntly said that Walter was taken away by the Order Enforcement Division. He recounted the whole incident. Leon frowned. It seems like your all-purpose wound medicine has attracted unwanted attention. Perhaps its effectiveness has caught someone's eye who wants to claim it as their own. I've seen this kind of tactic many times. First, they make it difficult for you to continue. Then, they send someone to talk to you about acquiring the formula. Robert's face turned solemn. The person who can take the all-purpose wound medicine formula from his hands has not been born yet. He looked at Leon. Do you have someone in the Order Enforcement Division at Corporation Q? Leon said yes. Just 2 days ago, 2 brothers were taken in. Robert almost laughed out loud. Is this what I asked unknown_04? Leon explained cheerfully. I'll give a shout out to Lawson over here. Walter will be released tonight. Just as the two of them were leaning on each other's shoulders and whispering, Walter walked into the shop from the door. He looked pitifully and said, Robert, I'm back. Robert turned his head and saw Walter, who gave him a fright. Walter, weren't you taken away by the Order Enforcement Division? I just arrived at the Order Enforcement Division when it seemed like they received a notification from higher up. They ended up sending me back. At this moment, Leon shivered beside me. They still have to give me face. Lawson is such a sensible kid. Robert suddenly felt that something was wrong. In fact, Lawson is not the master of 109 Fortress. If someone else comes up with the idea to use the all-purpose wound medicine, it will be difficult. Robert fell silent. Thinking about fighting and killing inside the fortress is not a good idea. Then Leon gave Robert his own phone number. Robert suddenly wondered, but haven't you been doing a lot of fighting and killing recently? This statement left Leon speechless. He went straight to see Daisy with Thomas, waiting for Leon to enter the backyard. Robert told him to be more careful recently. In the past, we all thought the fortress was heaven. Everyone wanted to sneak into the fortress. But only when I arrived here did I realize that there is no paradise in this world. How could you not think about it? The 4 members of the Journey to the West team, who have no blood relationship, are actually all close relatives. Just now, Cody is sleeping. A few people in big red uniforms came into the store. It turns out these people are from the Fortress Legal Affairs Division. Someone is suing Walter for unfair business competition. They specifically came to serve Walter with a court summons. Cody was stunned for a moment. What does unfair business competition mean? Carson from the Legal Affairs Division gave Cody a warning glance. He said, "You'll find out in court." Then he asked Cody if he was a direct relative. This summons requires an adult direct relative to sign for it. Cody said he is the one. Carson handed Cody a pen. He asked, "What is your relationship with the defendant?" Cody firmly said, "I am his senior marshal brother." He rendered his opponent speechless with these words. He snatched the warrant back and said, "Senior Marshal Brother My Foot, what are you messing around for?" Cody was also unhappy. He said, "The four of us master and disciples are like a family. How are we not considered immediate relatives?" Carson from the Legal Affairs Division was scolded for a long time. He said, "Immediate relatives are not to be interpreted this way. It's Warren." "Is there any difference? Warren is my third junior brother. All third junior brothers are immediate relatives. Why isn't the eldest junior brother counted?" What a mess this is. It's even confusing Carson. He was so angry that he turned and walked away. He felt he couldn't make things clear with Cody at all. In the evening, when Robert came back and found out about this, he furrowed his brows. At this moment, he suddenly felt out of place with this bustling fortress. Because they were refugees, they were viewed with curious eyes. When he first entered the school, the parents of the students wanted him to transfer because he was a refugee. Now, their shop has just started to thrive. The other party is trying to use the rules in the fortress to deal with him. The longer Robert lives in the fortress, the more he feels that life here is not as free as in the wilderness. Robert told Walter to accept any more subpoenas that come in. "I'll handle the rest." At the same time, Demon Whisperer LeBron sat with Sarah in a small shop eating noodles. Someone next to them is discussing what happened last night. The Order Enforcement Division did not keep this matter confidential, so the news about this spread very quickly. At this moment, LeBron smiled and said to the little girl that it should be that Robert. "Is it because you can't hypnotize him?" Sarah asked curiously. LeBron laughed. He had never tried to hypnotize Robert, but his intuition told him that Robert was very dangerous. "Should I go kill him?" Sarah's innocent tone seemed devoid of a sense of good or evil. The murderous words formed a stark contrast with her lovely face. LeBron shook his head. He has a different perspective on Robert. Besides, the current Sarah is no match for Robert. They sat in the quiet fortress, completely unaware of the unimaginable danger happening outside the distant fortress. A small team of Q family operatives in black combat uniforms emerged from a small path. They were fully armed, holding their weapons cautiously. Everything was done in silence. The pointman made a gesture, and the combat team advanced once again. If seen from above, the 30-person team looked like a giant mountain cat, slowly advancing into the battlefield. Quint has already died in the previous surprise attack by the experiment object, and now the 7th combat team is practically non-existent. Quaid intends to directly devour this troop to expand his own strength. As long as this operation is successful, then he can completely replace Luca in the presiding committee's position. Everything is going too smoothly now. It's just that Quaid feels a bit strange because this ruins is too quiet. However, as the massive combat sequence advances continuously, not a single experiment object has been seen. Along the road, human corpses can often be seen, painting a picture of the extensive damage caused by the disaster here. The whereabouts of the human face insect that attacked here are unknown. According to intelligence, this area has become the territory of experiment objects. However, as for the experiment objects, there are climbing traces on the edge of the crevice. Below, there seems to be a hiding place for experiment objects. But if encountering experiment objects down there, it is feared that none of those who enter would survive. Quaid frowned. The combat troops do not require thinking. You just need to execute. Originally, everyone thought that under the crack, there would be sounds of sorrow and gunfire advancing. No such sounds were heard. It was always quiet. Suddenly, the voice from the front line came through the communication channel. This underground place should be the nest of the experiment object. A huge cave was forcibly dug out. There is not even a single experiment object here. However, it is right here in this cave. There's actually a small laboratory here. It seems like the experiment object has moved some experimental equipment here. And there are used syringes on the ground. Quaid said coldly. Contract formation. There may no longer be experiment object here. Bring back the syringes and experimental equipment for me. Bring back 111 Fortress for sampling and research. I want to know what they injected. After receiving the message, the presiding committee also fell into contemplation. They do not know what this means. However, the experiment object can conduct research experiments themselves. They even inject medication to themselves. This news is too shocking. Suddenly, a secretary walked into the meeting room and said Luca had gone missing. A member of the presiding committee frowned and scolded. One Luca can't even take care of things properly. The old man asked calmly, inquiring about the direction in which the caravan departed. Towards the 109 fortress. Luca had already made a decision. It is likely that a large number of experiment objects are being transferred towards the 109 fortress. And Luca is heading towards the 109 fortress. He must be going to rescue his brother Leon. The most famous shadow in the corporation is about to lose control. Robert always feels something is not quite right these days. The whole fortress seems to have suddenly become calm. At the holiday ceremony after the final exam, Julia seemed to have disappeared. Robert did not see Julia anywhere. The only thing that did not surprise Robert was that Julia scored 140 points in each subject on the exam. Not 1 point more or 1 point less. Robert took the highest score shamelessly, while Julia was not present. Jessica looked a bit puzzled and said to Robert, "The handwriting on that paper is very delicate. It doesn't look like your handwriting, does it?" On the paper, it is written, "Robert, the class monitor of Class 7 in Grade 12. It really is your exam paper. I didn't expect you to score so high." Now, it's Robert's turn to not know what to say. He doesn't understand why Julia is doing this. Could it be that she is helping him? At the same time, the girl who copied Robert's test paper had an expression of speechlessness on her face. At this time, Robert had lost interest in studying and also had no interest in paying attention to what was happening at school, because he knew that something big was about to happen in the next few days. Everything now was just the calm before the storm. Robert watched the coming and going pedestrians outside. Suddenly, when a person passed by, they stuffed an envelope into his hand. Is this the intelligence that Leon arranged for someone to deliver to him? Why is it still so mysterious? He withdrew into the shop and opened the envelope to take a look. Inside was a piece of yellowed ginkgo leaf and a text message. Robert opened it up to read. A large number of experiment objects are missing in the direction of Fortress 113. Suspected to be on their way to attack Fortress 109. Find a way to leave the fortress within 3 days. The letter doesn't mention how to leave. But for Leon, giving such a reminder in a timely manner is already considered going above and beyond. After all, the relationship between everyone is not as deep as imagined. Now it seems that we can't stay in this 109 fortress any longer. Robert stood up and said to Walter and Luna that it's time to leave. Let's start packing up. Walter touched the freshly cleaned counter inside. Such a nice shop. I didn't expect to have to move again. This fortress of over 100 seats has stood on this wasteland for decades, even over 100 years. But now there have been one mishap after another. This is no coincidence. It's a sign that the real chaotic times are coming back. In the evening, an off-road vehicle came speeding by. 2 young men got out of the car and told Robert, "We're here to take away the goods." Julia said it was agreed upon with you. The goods these 2 men mentioned are probably Daisy. Robert did not doubt their identity, because only he and Julia knew about this matter. Robert looked at the 2 young men and said, "You can't take her away now. You'll have to wait a little longer." The 2 young men looked confused. Is there something important that needs to be done first? Robert thought to himself, I can't tell you that it's because the task isn't completed yet. There's still half an hour left until exactly 7 days. The 2 young people could only choose to wait helplessly. This is the most nagging Tang monk I have ever seen in order to complete the task. When Robert handed over Daisy, he talked nonsense for half an hour. The two young men from the mob were shocked at that moment. This is unknown_0 to wait a while. Watching Daisy's expression gradually collapse. Palace said side quest completed. New items inside vending machine unlocked. Two young men looked at Daisy with an expectant expression at this moment. They thought to themselves that perhaps all the preparatory persuasion work might not be needed anymore. They felt that as long as they could take Daisy away from Robert, she would already be very touched. Robert looked at the vending machine inside the palace. There was already a new compartment in the transparent display window. Robert looked a bit puzzled at the things in the window. That thing looks like a deck of cards. Finally completed a task with great difficulty.